We live in an interconnected world. So much so that every time you look at your watch, your computer, your car dash panel, your alarm clock next to your bed, or perhaps even the folks sitting next to you at a table while you're having dinner, it seems that data feeds are permeating every aspect of your life. I mentioned the people eating next to you at dinner because all too often we see a table of 4 right next to us, and every one of those people are staring at their handheld devices as opposed to speaking to each other. This is a new phenomenon. What does that mean? We're seeing the rise of something called the Internet of Things, also known as IoT. This is a space that will see tremendous growth and development. And with that growth and development will come risk, liability, legal challenges of all sorts. What happens when that toaster that is connected to the internet in your kitchen, your brand new, beautiful kitchen, gets hacked into by Russian hackers who sets the timer for your English muffin an hour early and removes the governor so that when it reaches 250 degrees Fahrenheit, it just keeps on going? That's a pretty frightening thought, the flaming toaster. Well, the Internet of Things is here, and we will continue to follow that path as it evolves. And my presentation today is going to talk about what I call the road to the data state. What is the data state? The data state is our destination, and we're on the road today. In the future, in the grand scheme of things, the not too distant future, it is likely that we will live in a world where data has transformed every aspect of our lives. Access to data, those that control data, those that manage data, how data is processed, where data lives, all of these issues will impact humanity of the future. Excuse me. So I've been asked, what is the data state? I'll give you a few hypotheses for the future. The data state is an earthly environment whereby the preeminence of data replaces that of human will, and where machines, 1, achieve self-awareness, 2, develop cognitive capabilities that surpass humans, 3, where they maintain industrial and agrarian capability required to sustain natural life on Earth, where they replicate autonomously, and eventually where they ascend to equality. Some of the interesting aspects of a potential future data state include these ideas. Self-aware machines manifest themselves as global networks and task specific narrow AI devices or artificial intelligence devices with the purpose of ensuring the survival of original and artificial life on Earth. A lot has been said about artificial intelligence and its acceptance as a component of our future has been debated. There are 2 primary types of artificial intelligence, wide and narrow. Wide artificial intelligence is where a device or group of devices have broad capabilities at cognitive and potentially self-aware computing, much in the same way as a human would. A human has wide intelligence, wide and deep, and is able to process information in a variety of ways with multiple inputs simultaneously. Narrow artificial intelligence, which is probably what's coming to a supermarket soon, is artificial intelligence where a device has been programmed to manage a very specific task, deep and wide, but only within that specific task. I'll give you an example. When you walk up to what used to be a clerk and is now a machine at a train station, and you ask to purchase a ticket, the machine that purveys or provides that ticket for you today is a rough form of artificial intelligence. It has the ability to ask certain questions of you and provide you with a ticket to where you need to go. In the future, those machines very well may carry on a conversation with you and will have the ability to answer questions about your destination, answer questions about why you would want to go there, perhaps get into a conversation with you about preferred times to go to a particular destination, as opposed to simply providing you with a ticket. So, in the not too distant future, and I'm speaking of a century or two, artificial intelligence will master this world of narrow artificial intelligence, where specific machines are tasked and have the capability to perform functions on a human-like, or perhaps even more effective than human-like manner. And then there will be other machines that run those machines. And there we will have a most interesting relationship. So a few other I'll give you one other bullet point, aspects of the data state. The data state will provide access to and management of data, where data becomes central to the artificial intelligence experience and the ability to manage global systems. So the lifeblood of the data state is data, because machines will trade on data. They will access and manage data to perform their functions, to make decisions, to respond to human requests, to act on their own on behalf of humans, etc., etc. And just for fun, here's an interesting one. Space travel to distant galaxies will finally become possible for self-aware creatures from Earth. Unfortunately, they won't be you or I. They'll be machines. Machines who are self-aware through artificial intelligence, who will have the ability to live for thousands of years, perhaps longer. We all know that it will take hundreds of years to get to the closest star, certainly thousands of years or longer to get to the closest galaxy. And that's traveling very quickly. So people say, gosh, far-fetched, way off in the future, impossible. I'll never live to see it. Well, perhaps not. I'll give you a few examples of technologies that in our own lifetimes have come of age and are now part of our experience on Earth. And these are stepping stones to the data state. They are dramatic stepping stones when you consider where we are today compared to where we were 200-300 years ago, 2,000-3,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, which in the grand scheme of things is a blink of an eye. So, a couple of contemporary stepping stones to the data state during our lifetime. The telephone, the fax machine, the personal computer, the internet, of course, Google. Wow, I don't have to remember anything anymore. I Google it. Couldn't remember anything anyhow, so perfect. Smartphones, big data, the Internet of Things, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, robotics. These are all within our lifetime. It's fascinating. People say to me, well, the Internet of Things, I don't need a flaming toaster. Well, okay, you don't need a flaming toaster, but here's something that you or your children may wear in the not-too-distant future. A white shirt that through nanotechnology and interconnectedness is able to change color when you decide that it should change color. Wouldn't it be nice to have a shirt that is blue in the morning and yellow in the afternoon and red at night? Well, maybe, maybe not. How about a shirt that advertises Coca-Cola on the front of the shirt in the morning, 7-Up in the afternoon, and Budweiser in the evening? And the shirt simply receives the signal, automatically displays the new ad, and, oh, here's the good part, you get a micropayment for every view of that ad on your shirt. That's the Internet of Things, and that's what's coming. So to frame this discussion in the perspective of human experience, I have this timeline. And this timeline will show you several primary periods in the human experience, we'll call it. To the left, you have what I'm calling early man. And these are rough numbers. You can certainly fudge them one way or the other by 1,000 years, or maybe even less, or maybe a little more. But in either case, early man. Let's call it 10,000 BC, excuse me, from 50,000 BC to 10,000 BC, a period of approximately 40,000 years. And we've illustrated it there on that timeline. Now, certainly mankind has been in existence for longer than this period. Mankind goes back millions of years, but we have very little insight into what early man prior to 50,000 years ago looked like, or where they lived, or how they behaved. But we have some understanding of what early man looked like during this period of time, even though it predates history. We find this information through archaeological digs, of course, and through the reconstruction of the evidence that we're able to find. Continue to the right on the timeline, and you'll come to the what I call prehistory period of mankind. We'll call this 10,000 BC to approximately 5,000 BC. And this is a period where man certainly was building things and doing interesting things, and inventing things, of course, and starting to communicate with each other and building these early relationships, which I like to call networks. And unfortunately, none of the record really survived, so we don't know what the history was then. But we know that they existed. We know that they formed communities. Now we can continue to the right, and we go into early civilizations, approximately 5,000 BC to 2,000 BC. These civilizations built civilizations that we know about because there's some historical record. We can think of the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Chinese civilizations and the Sumerians and the ancient Indus River Valley civilizations, and so on and so forth. Then we continue to the right, and I have what I call the recent civilizations, approximately 2000 BC to AD 1. The Greeks, the Romans, the Assyrians, the Persians, and many other great civilizations, clearly the Chinese as well. All of these civilizations grew and expanded and thrived because they were able to build networks, social networks, trading networks, communications networks. The interconnectivity of humans propelled these civilizations to evolve and to grow. And following that theme, we now go into the next little box here, which I'm calling modern history. Modern history, I'm calling, for the purpose of this discussion, AD 1 approximately to approximately 1800, a period of a little less than 2,000 years. During this epoch, you're speaking of everything from the Middle Ages right up through the Great Enlightenment. And then at the very far right of this timeline, you have a very small little yellow or orange sliver, which represents about 500 years. And I'm calling that the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment and reason to the Intelligence Revolution. Now, in the preceding period of time, the networks of humanity expanded. We built trading routes across great oceans. We built roads across land masses and trading routes across land masses. And as we enter into the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, we find that humanity is on the cusp of understanding how to harness machines and the great laws of physics to expand their capabilities dramatically. Leveraging steam, leveraging electricity, leveraging gravity, leveraging the atom. All of these things take place in the next 500 years. So this next slide shows the next 415 years, approximately 500 years, starting with the Age of Enlightenment and Reason from approximately 1700 to 1800, moving into the Industrial Revolution, approximately 1800 to 1900, and then going into the Information Revolution, which I catalog as being from approximately 1900 to 2000, and there's some debate on that, but that's my catalog of what the Information Revolution is. And then going into what I call the Intelligence Revolution, which we are just entering. It goes from 2000 to whenever. I've earmarked here 2100. We'll see what happens. I won't be here to tell you, but perhaps my children will. So this block of 400 and some odd years is a fascinating time in the development of human history, and it leads us to a number of revolutionary concepts that are impacting us even to this day. On this next slide, I show you some of those impacts. The Industrial Revolution, which I've highlighted, one of the primary impacts here is that it displaces agrarian and manufacturing workers with industrial machinery. And that has massive transformative effects on society around the world. On the next slide, you'll see an early transportation mode during the early Industrial Revolution. You have a covered wagon. Now, you might look at this picture and say, well, what's industrial about that? Well, I actually, many of the artifacts and devices that are built into these harnesses and to the wagon wheels and into the wagon itself are the result of the efficiencies of the Industrial Revolution and the ability for things like textile mills to quickly pump out canvas, as an example, which is covering this wagon that you could purchase at a reasonable price, or perhaps the metal joints and fittings and rivets that are holding components of this wagon together. 200 years earlier, to have a wagon of this nature would be a very, very costly thing. By the time the Industrial Revolution is well underway, things like a wagon and countless other artifacts become far more affordable and allow for greater movement of people and interconnectedness, networks. The greatest American network up till that time is probably the movement of eastern land folks on the eastern side of the United States to the west by covered wagon. So the next slide shows you the Information Revolution, and so approximately 1900 to 2000, and I think one of the primary driver or impacts of that epoch is the displacement of non-skilled workers with technology and communications machinery. During this period of time, machinery displaces massive numbers of workers and just changes the equation on every aspect of human, sort of the human experience. Here's an example on the next slide of an early information revolution vehicle. And think of the impact that this Ford Model A had on individuals in the 1920s and 30s, and how revolutionary that vehicle and vehicles like it was or were, particularly compared to the slide of the covered wagon. It wasn't too long ago, in the grand scheme of things, based on the first timeline slide that I showed you, that humans were simply walking with a stick, maybe. And now we're riding along in the rumble seat of a Model A. The network is growing. It is becoming more interconnected. We now enter into the intelligence revolution. And the promise of the intelligence revolution, of course, is the possibility of intelligent machines. Is that where we're going? Well, if so, one of the major impacts could be the displacement of skilled workers with intelligent and self-aware machines. Now, it's one thing to consider that a non-skilled worker gets displaced by a machine, which has happened everywhere. In fact, yesterday when I was at the market, going through the checkout stand is no longer a human. It is now a machine with lasers, and it can read the barcodes faster than the human used to, and it checks me out of the market. It has a scale built into it to weigh the goods. It has the lasers built into it to read the barcode scanner. It has a payment terminal built into it, and it has a few other features. What is that called? A robot. People think robots have to look like they came out of a 1950s science fiction movie, or they have to look like R2-D2. Actually, no. Robots are all around us. And I dealt with a robot yesterday when I checked out at the market. So the intelligence revolution will have the same effect on skilled workers that the information revolution had on non-skilled workers. It's coming to a market near you. On the next slide, you'll see an early intelligence revolution vehicle. This is the Tesla. It's the state-of-the-art of intelligent vehicle design today. And it is, well, notwithstanding the Google self-driving car and others like it. But the Tesla has wonderful, unique abilities and interacts with the driver in a remarkable way. And the manufacturing process of Tesla has allowed for it to be self-correcting, so that when you have a problem, such as a software glitch or perhaps hackers that may have broken into the Tesla or a Tesla from the factory floor have the ability to remotely update the software of those devices, those cars, those machines, remotely. And as we saw recently, when it was announced that there was a vulnerability in Tesla's software code that could be exploited by hackers, they were very quick to roll out a fleet-wide patch which updated every Tesla on the road within a matter of hours. Very different from what happened to Chrysler when it was discovered that they also had a vulnerability in their systems, yet there was no way to roll out an update or a patch to those systems, those vehicles, and as a result have had to recall over 1 million cars. That brings you to the logical question: how do you ensure that your devices are safe? Well, that'll be a topic for another presentation, but allow me to say this. As counsel for manufacturers or designers or builders of systems that are going to be interacting on the Internet of Things or the Internet or the networks, which for the most part would be just about everything, you need to think through how those systems will be patched, how they will be repaired, how your manufacturer will interact with those devices once they're in the field. It's no longer acceptable to sell a device that has a chip in it that is hard programmed, embedded, if you will, that cannot be updated in most applications. The next slide is a graph, essentially, that will illustrate the relationship between humans and machines today in 2015. Now, there are many ways of looking at this dynamic. This is only one. And I illustrate it here in simplistic terms so that I can counterbalance 2015 with 2115 and what that may look like should the Internet of Things evolve into the data state that I have proposed here. On this slide, you'll see that connected humans are in the center of the circle. Why? Well, because connected humans are paramount and of the greatest importance to the greater good. The greater good being the survival of the human species on Earth, so that we may replicate. Well, in support of the human experience on Earth, which is at the center of this chart, you'll notice that we have communications and the Internet all around us. Communications and the Internet may be something as simple as my smartphone, or maybe something as complex as the IRS's tax filing system. You then have a circle surrounding that, which is known as the dark web. The dark web is the space on the Internet that is somewhat clandestine. It is unknown. It is unindexed. Only certain individuals or certain groups leverage the dark web, and they use the dark web in such a way to obfuscate their movement or their communications, because it is a unmapped space which is accessible only using certain tools. So much of the illicit trading that goes on today between folks that are either selling drugs or perhaps arms or perhaps stolen credit card numbers and other illicit activity takes place on the dark web. Surrounding that are robots. And I earlier told you what a robot looks like. You can go to your local supermarket and meet one. Robots are everywhere. You go to a local hospital, you may see a robot who is monitoring you. We have robots in all corners. And then around that, we have what we call the Internet of Things. And this is a quickly evolving space. The yellow band that is representative of the Internet of Things here will grow in size as we add additional connected devices to the global networks. And the final circle is disconnected humans. These are humans that are on the periphery of the information revolution and the Internet. They're on the periphery of all three: the industrial revolution, the Internet revolution, the information revolution, and the evolving world of telecommunications. These are villagers, perhaps, in rural areas of the world that have not been connected. They are laborers who are not part of the who are not interconnected on a daily basis. This group, this band, this blue band, will also shrink over time because it will be pretty necessary for virtually all humans in the future to be connected on some level. It'll be very difficult for humans to exist in the future without being interconnected to the data state. Here's some examples of what each one of these categories represent. A disconnected human, again, could be a villager or a day laborer in rural India who has never seen a computer and does not have a cell phone and has never connected to the local landline telephone in the village. Those individuals are rapidly disappearing. The Internet of Things. The Tesla automobile is a perfect example of something that is part of the Internet of Things. The Tesla automobile is constantly connected to the Internet. Robots. Well, a good example of a robot would be a vehicle manufacturing system in any modern vehicle manufacturing plant. A vehicle manufacturing system can assemble a component of an automobile far faster and far more efficiently and with far greater quality control than a human today. The dark web, again, it's the non-indexed or readily available data. Communications in the Internet, that's the global networks for telecommunications, which we have built and we are continuing to enhance, such as satellite, GPS, the ATM network, the World Wide Web, telecommunications. And then finally, connected humans, which are you and I. On the next slide, you'll see what the human-machine relationship stack looks like 100 years from now. This is one scenario. Certainly it's not the only scenario. There's many ways this can play out. But this will give us some food for thought. This is 2115. I'll be dead. My children will be in their 90s or perhaps their hundreds. And perhaps my grandchildren will be hard at work trying to figure out how to survive in this new world. Where in the middle we have what I'm calling the executive. And the executive really is a machine. It's not a machine as we have traditionally thought of a machine, one box sitting in a room. The machine really is an interconnected global network of machines. I know, the Internet. Isn't that what the Internet is? An international, global, connected network of machines? Well, that network will become the executive. And when it becomes self-aware, it will quickly transcend into the most important thing on the planet. And humans will start to take a back seat. Our role will change. It'll evolve. Surrounding the executive, we have the dark web. This is still an area that is dark to us because the executive will control it. We won't. And it will surround us. It'll be indexed only for the executive. We will not have access. And it's through control of the dark web that humans will either be controlled or will harmoniously interact with the executive. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Surrounding the dark web, we have the Internet of Things. And these are devices, both those that the executive controls and those that humans rely upon, that will do everything for us, from pick our berries in the fields to manufacture the seats that we sit on, to make decisions about everyday tasks, to really everything else that you can imagine, including that shirt that will change color or advertise a product for you. That will be the Internet of Things. Surrounding that will be the communications and Internet backbone that supports all of this. And then finally, almost at the bottom of the barrel, will be robots. Self-contained autonomous robots that interact with humans on a more daily level or in a daily manner, and robots that we use for physical labor and for other activities, and not necessarily controlled exclusively by the executive. These are robots that humans will have control over to some degree as well. Finally, we have the outer layer, humans, struggling to find their new role on planet Earth. What is the purpose of being human when you have a machine that actually controls all communications and is far smarter and probably funnier than any human, and can outthink us, out-memorize us, out-theorize us, and perform all the tasks that we need performed? Don't know. Here's a few examples of this relationship definition, or these relationship definitions. Human. Of course, that's you and everyone else, and me. We're all connected. We're connected to these devices, and some other interesting devices that I'll share in a few minutes. We have robots, which are self-aware machines developed for specific tasks that humans rely upon. We have communications in the internet, which are the global networks, which just become more infused with everything that we do. We have the Internet of Things, which are all physical and virtual objects. I just don't see why there would be any object that would be made in the future that wouldn't be connected on some level. I mean, there's a few outliers, art, perhaps. And then we have the dark web, which is the encrypted communications environment exclusively for the executive. Now, we may say here today as we sit, oh, well, we would never allow that. We're not going to allow the executive to have their own communications environment, their own channel, this dark web. Well, it may be something that we won't be able to control at that point. So understanding the relationship between humans and the machine, the executive, in the future will be one of the great flashpoints for humanity and how we navigate those waters. And finally, there's the executive, the controlling entity for all things. It may be machine or it may be human or a combination thereof. But if you think about how Google has grown in the last 15 years, and you think about the knowledge that is contained within the Google servers and systems and how humans around the planet now rely on Google and others, but I'm just singling out Google, for so much. We have freely given Google the ability to provide those services for us by simply relying on them. And Google has expanded using the technologies of the day, rightfully so, and we have become reliant upon those technologies. So that, if you follow that thread through, there's really nothing to stop humans from continuing to rely on machines to do tasks for us. So what happens then? Well, the job makeup certainly changes in this country and elsewhere. I put a slide up here which will give you a couple of examples. Blue-collar jobs, labor, industry, service, all replaced by automation, with very few exceptions. It's already happening. White-collar jobs, well, that's executive, financial, professional, medical, educational, replaced by automation, replaced by machines. There's no reason to have a medical practitioner or professional who doesn't understand every aspect of their domain, right? Well, a machine certainly could understand every aspect of their specific medical domain. I'd rather rely on a machine than a human, perhaps. Financial. Why would I need an accountant if a machine can figure all that out for me? A lawyer. Why wouldn't I want to have a lawyer that knows every single law, who can recite every statute, and who can think through all of the various issues and provide me with all the options of strategy? Oh, and write that brief within 2 nanoseconds. So much for the billable hour. Then we have what I call 2 new job categories: green-collar jobs and black-collar jobs. Green-collar jobs will be jobs that are developed to support the machine. They'll include things that may be difficult for machines, maybe installing solar panels and wind turbines, getting way up on top of the wind turbine to, put in that final bolt or screw. Managing small jobs requiring certain types of dexterity. There may be some of those types of jobs that still require humans. Maybe things like forestry, livestock assistance. I think animals may still have a problem interacting with some machines, and it may be good to have some humans in there milking cows. Robots already do that. But there's probably something that humans could do with livestock. Entertainment. I think humans probably still like to be entertained by humans, and even though they're coming out with human sex toys, essentially, humans that will replace other humans for sexual acts, I think humans still would like to have entertainment mainly by humans. Maybe some levels of food preparation I could see, some healthcare issues. But for the most part, green-collar jobs will exist to support the machine. And then finally we have black-collar jobs, which are jobs that are assisting the executive These are human interface clerks that may be required for certain types of relationships between the humans and the executive, and perhaps policing and military. I think having a human touch on the ground will probably be nice. The impact on humanity is grand. You'll have fewer people required to support the economy, or in a position of those in power, so machine or human. So humanity will really require fewer people because machines will do so much. So the result of that is massive unemployment, which of course will create tremendous social upheaval. And unfortunately, there's one stream of thought along these lines, if you follow this all the way through, that would have us in a terrible, terrible way when it comes to the conflicts that will exist between humans in order to survive and to provide relevancy to the machine. You'll have green and black collar jobs, which I discussed, supporting the machine, versus white collar and blue collar jobs today, which are almost all exclusively subject to automation. You'll have a diminishment of the economic incentive for humans to attain high education. Why would I go to college if the machine knows everything that I need to know and I simply ask? And anything that I would want, the machine can provide, assuming that I'm still in a position to interact with the machine. So you take that to its logical conclusion, and you find that you have a much smaller population of humans and a much less educated population of humans.
The first code is 878. The first code is 878.
That will have a blowback in many ways, and you will have humans that will form black markets and underground societies and underground communities, which will, of course, result more than likely in human colonies that are not dependent upon the machine. And again, for point of clarification, when I say the machine, I'm speaking of the global artificial intelligence-enabled networking infrastructure that allows for narrow artificial intelligence and potentially wide artificial intelligence-driven machines to perform tasks on behalf of humans. So there's a few drivers which we can be watching today, and as attorneys, as you're thinking about the future and as you're thinking about where your clients may be driving to today, these are some of the spaces that you can watch. 1, ubiquitous connectivity. 2, processing capabilities. 3, miniaturization and nanotechnology. 4, the integration of technologies with humans. And 5, bandwidth and network expansion. So this is all from a technical point of view. We also have other fields that we can be watching that focus on commercialization issues, on legal issues, on social development issues, etc. Oh, ethics as well. But I'm going to give you some examples of these 5 or 6 areas just to show you what it looks like. This next slide shows you the cloud in a very, very simple way, and that speaks to ubiquitous connectivity. Right now, on my laptop or on my cell phone, I have ubiquitous connectivity to all of these devices on the cloud. And I've illustrated some of them here on this chart. Google, Salesforce.com, Microsoft, Amazon, Rackspace, Yahoo, etc. These are environments on the global networks that provide me with services that I have ubiquitous access to. This is just the very, very beginning of this intelligence and information revolution. And you're seeing it in the cloud. This will continue to evolve and expand until it touches every aspect of our lives. If you ever wanted to know what the cloud looks like physically, here's a picture. This is a large facility containing rack-mounted servers, and they're in a temperature-controlled and secure space, and there are thousands of them. huge, massive buildings that contain these servers that you connect to every time you go onto your cell phone and type in Google or any of these other sites. So when I talk about the machine or the executive or this global computing powerhouse that will both automate and simplify our lives and potentially run our lives, I'm talking about the machines that you're looking at on the screen right now. These are located in very sophisticated, very secure buildings, impenetrable by anything other than massive military equipment, and run on their own backup generators and power if necessary, and are protected by armed guards today with fingerprinting and iris scanning and all of these various security devices in order to visit or to get in. Next concept here is processing capabilities, and something that you may hear about with more regularity these days is something called data analytics. And data analytics is the ability to quickly analyze data in order to make decisions. You have a mass of data, which they call big data today, and if you can weed through the patterns and relationships within big data, you can extract out valuable and wonderful information. Today, much of that information is being used for things in the world of science and medicine, as well as marketing, communications, and logistics for government services. But data analytics on big data will continue to evolve so that it touches every aspect of our lives. Here's some example screenshots of what it visually looks like using data analytic tools to understand the relationships between computers or machines within cyberspace, if you will. These are screenshots showing machines and their interconnectivity between other machines. And with data analytics, you're able to extract data points from the communications between these machines to draw inferences or conclusions about that data, which will help you decide how to perhaps build a device or develop a marketing campaign or figure out whether or not it makes sense to file a class action or whatever the case may be. There's a million and one uses. So as technicians and folks in that world today look at both data analytics and the networks in which they're communicating upon, they're beginning to see things from the perspective of the machine. Here's a graphic that shows what a Fortune 1000 company looks like in 3D. Each one of these large nodes that look like flowers represent a facility from a Fortune 1000 company. And each one of the dots of light on each of those nodes or little flowers represent a computer or a device within that physical space. So computers through communication, traverse these networks in this manner. And we have the ability to manage those networks. In the future, those networks will, in many ways, manage themselves. Actually, many of them are already managing many components on their own today autonomously, and that will only continue to evolve. Another couple of points here, miniaturization, nanotechnology, and the integration of technology with humans. I'll show you a few additional slides to show you where we have come from and where we're going. Consider the concept of wearable computers. Here are some photographs of what a wearable computer looked like in 1980, the mid-1980s, the early 1990s, mid-1990s, and the late 1990s. And here's what a video conferencing concept watch looked like in 1998. In 1998, this watch seemed like it was pretty far off in the future. Maybe in 20, 30 years, we might have a watch on our wrist that can have video conferencing and can conduct all of these various features. Of course, in the 1940s and 1950s, and science fiction and Dick Tracy and all of this, devices like this were theorized, but they felt that they're way, way off in the future. And sure enough, they were off in the future, but not way off in the future. Here we are in 2015, and as you can see, we have the Apple Watch, which has all of these various features that were considered far-off science fiction just 75 years ago. As we continue along this thread, you'll see that miniaturization plays a role. This is a 20 gigabyte hard drive the size of a quarter with a spinning disk. Now, spinning disk technology is incredible, and it has achieved so much for us, but in the future, disk drives will no longer be spinning. They will be solid state, as many drives are today, and as you probably know of the term flash media or flash drives, these are solid state drives. Here's an example of a solid state drive conceptualized in the future. Oh, not the too distant future either. I'm thinking maybe a year out. This is the 2 terabyte micro SD drive that would fit in your telephone. It sits on the palm of your finger there. 2 terabytes. That's big. But how big? Well, 2 terabytes is enough for 3,000 feature-length movies in DivX format. It's enough for 40 high-def Blu-ray films. It's enough for 2,860 compact discs. Or it's enough to account for 2% of all global internet traffic in 1993. Think about that. 2 terabytes is the amount of data processed by Google every 8 seconds. It's also, if you were to print it out, 120 stacks of paper, typewritten, as high as the Eiffel Tower. 2 terabytes is a lot of data, but these little micro drives will appear everywhere. And so we have come to a point we are now able to miniaturize data to the extent that once these devices are more interconnected and have greater capacity for artificial intelligence, we have overcome one of the obstacles, and that is the miniaturization of storage. So bandwidth and network expansion is the final area that I will cover, and I will talk about how the global networks have expanded over time. Here's perspective for us. An early network of Roman roads in 40 AD. This is what they looked like, and they still exist today. You can traverse Roman networks by taking an airplane to Italy, standing on one of these roads, and walking from one village to the next. Very simple, very rudimentary. That Roman road network expanded throughout the Mediterranean and was used successfully for hundreds and hundreds of years to build an empire. Of course, there's other empires. The Vikings, here's a ship from 900 AD, which allowed Vikings to traverse great bodies of water, including the Atlantic Ocean, arriving in North America. These types of networks changed the landscape of humanity's experience. And as we rapidly go through time, you'll notice folks like Marco Polo here in 1260, who develops a network for Europeans for trade to China. Or Ferdinand Magellan, who's able to, well, his ship was able to successfully circumnavigate the globe. He died along the way, but his crew remained. Here he is in 1505, and an amazing experience to circumnavigate the globe 500 years ago. Now we do it in a matter of a nanosecond, on the network, of course. Here's some early network perspective for us. The Gutenberg Bible in 1454, the first printed Bible, which allowed for humans to start to read in a consistent and uniform fashion an important work of humanity, the Bible. In 1702, we have the first daily newspaper. Here it is in what would become the United States. Because of the advent of movable type and the printing press, we're able to now take words and move them along our network to other individuals. The network, of course, being dirt roads on a horse in a leather satchel as the newspaper gets carried from Village A in what would become New Hampshire to Village B in what would become Rhode Island. In 1853, because of the advent of electricity and telecommunications, we have here the United States Telegraph and a telegraph station map. This is, in my estimation, an early map of the Internet. We're sending electronic signals across wires from point A to point B again. But instead of from one village to another village, very close to each other, we're speaking of sending a signal from New York to Savannah, Georgia, electronically and very quickly, using Morse code, of course. And then we ramp up to the turn of the last century and we have the telephone. Suddenly the networks have come right to your home and you're able to pick up the telephone and reach out and touch someone. Then we have the radio in the 1920s, allowing for wireless communications. Yes, wireless communications 100 years ago, sitting in everyone's living room, listening to fireside chats by Mr. Roosevelt and others. Here in 1945, we have the Global Telecommunications Map. These are underwater sea cables laid by Cable and Wireless so that you could communicate from London to New York, also using signals, electronic signals carried along copper cables, bundled cables underneath the oceans. Amazing. 1950s, television. You know what that brought us? The TV dinner, which will, of course, only be made by robots in the future. Here we have the first commercially available computer in 1951. It was in England. It's called the Manchester Universal Electronic Computer. Here's a catalog for it. It's extraordinary. In 1969, we witnessed more wireless communications. Here's Buzz Aldrin standing on the surface of the moon. Another very important thing happened that year, the Internet. Here's a map of the first node, September 1969, of the Internet. We have UCLA connected to the first host, Sigma 7 it was called, and it was called the ARPA network, September 1969. Well, the Internet rapidly expanded. Watch this. December of 1969, there are now 4 nodes. You have the Stanford Research Institute connected to a 940 up at the top. You have UCLA, of course, connecting to University of Santa Barbara, UCSB, connected to an IBM 360 on the left. And then you have the Stanford Research Institute connected to Utah and to a computer there. Of course, we all know what happens with the Internet. It expands rapidly over the years until it becomes ubiquitous and lays the foundation for the Internet of Things, which lays the foundation for the DataState. Here's a few additional computers and devices that I'll share with you for early network perspective. In 1974, and by the way, this is also so that you can understand the condensation of computing power and the reduction of cost of that computing power. Here's an IBM 5100 personal computer in 1974, which sold for $15,000. Contrast that, of course, with the ARPANET geographical map in 1977, which is still the Internet with all of these various nodes. You'll see that it connects to the RAND Corporation and to UCLA and continues to evolve on the West Coast. And now it traverses the United States and stops along the way at many Air Force bases and research institutions. And it is now on the East Coast and connected to NYU and Rutgers and the Pentagon and NORAD, and continues all the way over to London, represented by that interesting squiggly line. Through a satellite, of course, NORSAR. That's fascinating as well, how the Internet was able to leverage satellite technology so quickly. Then in 1985, we have the IBM personal computer, its evolution. For $2,500, you too could have this floppy disk-enabled personal computer running DOS and change your life, right? Changed my life when I had my first one. Then we get to to an early handheld computer. Here's 1999. For $500, you could have this Windows CE Cassiopeia and work your way through the menu system there to find what you're looking for. In 2005, this is what the UUNet USA network map looked like. At the time was the backbone of the United States Internet. And then, of course, we arrive in 2015. And today, Microsoft launched its new flagship line of devices powered by Microsoft Windows 10. And here you have a photograph of it. costing somewhere in the $650 to $750 range.
The second code is
157.
the second code is
157.
So the internet is an interesting place. It forms the backbone for what will become the data state. And as somebody who's interested in mapping and cartography, I'm interested in understanding how you would map your way around the internet. There have been a number of projects that have focused on that. Here's one of them. This is an example of a map of the internet with an explosion shot there showing you how any one of these nodes will interconnect you with multiple IP addresses. So think of this internet and think of who controls all of the access. Think of the future when the executive or the machine or whatever it may be can control how and when data flows across this network. Which devices receive feeds, which don't. Which robots or which devices on the Internet of Things will function, which ones will not. And why and how much those operations will cost. The complexity of the Internet is so grand and so great that humans will lose the ability to manage all of these processes without the intervention and assistance of machines. We probably are already there. So if you extrapolate that into the future, one has to come to the conclusion that as machines continue to evolve and gain some self-autonomy or great autonomy, that there will come an inflection point where humans and machines will have to square off and decide who's on top. Food for thought as we contemplate what the future looks like in the world of the data state. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for your attention.